Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live New Zealand. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, editor for CIO New Zealand. My guest today is Neville Richardson, CIO at Gallagher. Hello, Neville. How's things in the Waikato today?
Hey, Kathy. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's a sunny and stormy day in the Waikato, so
yes,
business as usual. Absolutely.
Great. So to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what your team at Gallagher does?
Yeah, so obviously my responsibility is for all of the corporate IS environment here at Gallagher. And Gallagher itself we're an 83-year-old startup. That's how we like to think of ourselves. Something that people don't often know about us, we're actually New Zealand's largest privately owned technology business. And we've got two lines. So world-class agricultural technology, which includes the electric fence, which is what everybody associates Gallagher with, and also the best security solutions in the world. And whether you're on either side of those, we like to say, what we do is protecting what matters the most. It's about 1,200 people working for Gallagher across the world, with major offices in New Zealand, North America, Australia, and the UK. From an IS perspective, we've got about 50 people, and we're arranged in four major value streams. So we provide everything from infrastructure services to enterprise line of business applications such as CRM and ERP, also modern analytics capabilities, and also development and security services. So that's pretty much our portfolio of offerings that we deliver.
So an 83-year-old startup, I love that. That's such a great description of Gallagher and what it does. So obviously, as an 83-year-old startup, transformation is a huge part of what you and your team does. And often the word transformation is either misused or overused. And it's often as a given that it's something that just happens in organizations, but in reality, transformation is not an easy thing to do. So how has that approach taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, people like to talk about digital transformation like it's purely a technology thing. And I actually think that's one of the, the fundamental problems that we've got with the transformations we try and undertake nowadays. So we've been doing the technology transformation thing for the last 30 years. I think the difference now is that everybody is a technologist. It's not the purview of one department anymore. And that's clearly a challenge to the IS organization, but it's also an opportunity for us to grow. So, part of that is, our job in terms of the transformation environment is to provide, building blocks and environments and components that, and then honestly step out of the way sometimes. So we're giving the autonomy to those teams that are close to the customers and the ones that are focused on adding value. But I would say one of the difficulties with that, and I think that's a cornerstone of digital transformation, is you can't have autonomy without the accountability. So, as from an IS perspective, we've got some new roles to play going forward, and whether that be assurance, risk, the architectural oversight. And from a transformation point of view, there's sort of three things I would say we should really focus on, and that's that improving of customer experiences, but not forgetting that the operational processes need to be more efficient. So that's certainly a second strand. And the third one, and this is the one where we need to grow ourselves, is to be able to think differently, whether that's new operating models, and that's not just for the organization, that's for IS and the way we deliver our services, but also the new products and services we would want to offer as a business. I think those three things are really the key to effective digital transformations.
Now, you've touched on this already a little bit, but do you think there's ever a starting point to kick off a transformation in an organization?
Yeah, I do. And I think for me, the starting point, there has to be a business strategy to attach to. So why should we be doing a transformation? And I know that, the why is often an overused term, but if we can't really describe to our peers why we are doing this thing and why it's a transformation, then it's a struggle. People will ask quite naturally, what's in it for them. And it's a CIO's job to widen the conversation beyond technology and ask some really simple questions just to get people thinking. And there's a couple I can think of immediately. So here we would say, what would life be like if everybody at Gallagher was a digital native? And the second one related to that is, what would life be like if every decision could, not should, but could be a data-driven one? And getting the answers to these simple questions is really what gets people thinking about the why. And I think if you can answer them, then that helps us to deliver a strategic intent, and then we're on the way. But if we can't get, reasonable answers to those questions, we probably need to go back and say, well, why are we doing this in the first place? So again, a lot of leaders will say that it's not providing the answers, it's asking really great questions. But that's certainly one of the roles that I play, is, asking simple questions like that.
Absolutely, some great insights there, and definitely a lot of things that CIOs need to reflect on, starting with that why, and asking their peers. So in any transformation, there's obviously challenges. What do you think are some of the common roadblocks to avoid along the way?
There's a couple of things that spring immediately to mind. The biggest roadblock I've seen in my career is applying the wrong solution to a root cause. In that, I mean that, successful IT delivery, and so transformation, does relate to the interplay of a couple of things. So the first one is that what we call the technological system, and that's technology and business process. And as IT people, we're really good in that space. But there's a second part to that, and that's what we call the socio-system. So it's people and structure. So IT people, as I've said, we are, or we should be, really good at that first one. But how often have we seen, as IT professionals, good technology has actually failed? And it's because we ignore that other side of the equation. And I have to say, if I look back in my career, the majority of the failures that I've seen have been down to being really good on that technological side, but completely ignoring the social side. And I would also say that in terms of transformation, that you have to engage your business on the culture of transformation. And that's the real hard bit. We can do so much now with technology. I don't see that as the problem. It's using those models to make sure we're applying the right solution to the right thing, and also having the right culture. And in Gallagher, we call that cultural transformation, we call it better ways of working, because we're literally looking for better ways to work. And one of the tenets of that is actually having better days at work. So it's not just the what we do in terms of the job, but we want to enjoy what we do more as well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So on the people piece then, it is so important, and other CIOs have touched on this as well. So how do you get the buy-in, from your, your exec stakeholders, but also from, the people who are on the workshop floor?
My goodness, I learned this one quite some time ago. I used to work for BMW, and we did a whole lean program back in the day. And one of the things that really stuck with me is what we call the Gemba walk. So it's actually going out there, engaging with the people that use technology, and just see how they use it, and be open to, to understand, what problems they have, what are the struggling moments. And it's amazing how often you find that your perspectives on how the technology is used changes completely when you go out there and do one of those walks and go around and about and see what's happening. And we've got a program here at Gallagher. We call it Find Out Why. So there's there's hiring and firing moments when it comes to technology. And what we want to know is, why do people want to change? What's the hiring moment with any kind of change in any use of technology? But there are also those firing moments. And back to the earlier example, when we've got things that are seen as failures of technology, is it the technology or is it the business process? Because it's a cliche, but if you systemize a rubbish process, you're just going to get to a rubbish result quicker. And then on the other side, do the people that we've got, do they know how to drive the technology? And finally, are we structured in a way that actually makes the best use of the technology once we've got it in? Because we may do some changes and completely ignore the fact that there may be different people in different roles as a result of that change. So that's certainly one. I've only really answered part of that question there, but getting out and being active in the business and seeing what people really do is absolutely one thing. And that's not just for the CIO, that's for everybody in IS. But the second part is having that influence at the league table and collaborate with your, so our leadership team is called the ELT. And the biggest change that I came to this role 4 years ago, the biggest change that I made coming into this, and it's the one big change, was considering that ELT team as my A team and operating accordingly. And I would say to any CIO that's not doing that already, to say that that's the thing that you really want to focus on, because earlier on in my CIO career, I definitely saw myself as the IT person first, and I just happened to sit on the exec, and that was really holding me back, and also the IT voice at that exec table. Whereas now the ELT, it's definitely my A team, and it's within that team where we have, the conversation at high level, that we get consensus in terms of what we do, and then we leave that room with a consistent voice and message. So the IS messages are not just coming from the IS leader, they're coming from everybody, and vice versa. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, some great points there, and so valuable, isn't it, to have that buy-in from your peers on the exec team, because ultimately they're going to have to also deal with the questions from their teams.
They are
the changes happening.
And Kathy, as well, our competition is outside of our four walls. It's not within the organisation, and we're all motivated to do a great job for Gallagher, and sometimes we just need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Neville, do you see transformation as a project with a deadline and milestones and celebrating the wins along the way? Or do you think that transformation is just an ongoing development? Is there ever an end date to transformation?
I don't see how they can be, to be honest. And quite often as IT people, we think of things in a project basis, and that's one of the pivots in thinking that we need to have anyway. Because yes, of course, there are foundational elements. If we're adding, something totally new, there is a project to introduce that technology, but then we need to consider that it's like a production line. We've introduced the production line, and there is incremental change all the time happening with that. And it's the same with culture. If culture is left unattended, it may well become something that you absolutely don't want. As I've said, we're moving from technology being the purview of just one part of the organization to something that involves everybody. And so the critical thinking, some of those skills that you've seen typically in IS people, we need that kind of thinking out there and wider in the community. There is also some of the challenge for IS people is some of our peers or customers, they know more about the technology than we do, and that in itself can be challenging. And that is also part of the culture journey. There are things that IS need to do, and I've talked about risk and security and architectural guidance and all of those things, and we'll continue to do those things, but we want to do them in a framework that allows teams to be autonomous and deliver the things that they need to do whilst being accountable. And again, these are all cultural elements. I know that I can do this thing, within if you're doing agile within a squad, and that's all good, but I know as soon as I step out that boundary, I'm going to ask somebody else, and we're going to find out, what to do, and we're going to find out, better ways of doing work. So all of these things come back to the culture of the organization.
Yeah, and as you said, it's no longer just the playpen of the IT team. As you said, it's wider than that in the organization now. So with the role of CIO evolving, what do you think are some of the key attributes of a successful modern day CIO?
Goodness, I'd love the answer to that question sometimes. But this is, there are three areas that I've seen are key attributes. The first is CIOs have to drive certain things. So we need to drive our organizations from being, like that transformation from being IT led to being business led. So that digital leadership needs to come from all of us. And there's also a drive from the CIO that changes exactly as we've just spoken about, from seeing the world as delivering projects to actually the ongoing maintenance and development of products. And there's different ways of delivery there. So the CIO has to be totally behind that. I can't be siloed and say IT is all my stuff, because any digital transformation is absolutely going to fail there. The second one is in terms of orchestration. So, no more top-down governance. Governance has to be co-creative. It has to be adaptive. And we also, as CIOs, need to orchestrate that agile learning environment. And the third one is a bit of CIO engineering. And thankfully, within my team, I've got some other people to help me around that. But when we consider both architecture, but also the manners of delivery, IT organizations have delivered in quite a monolithic way. We now need to engineer our organizations and our architectures and everything else involved in that to be truly composable. Not only do we get agility when we do that, but also you're reducing the blast area when you try and change things. And finally, the second part of engineering piece is changing from being a systems operator to really being that, digital foundation engineer. So putting all those digital foundations that we need in there, and I'll say it again, then getting out of the way and letting people get on with it. So those would be the three areas that I would call out.
Yeah, and getting out of the way is hard sometimes for CIOs to do,
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
What else am I going to do?
So just on that, there is, as you will know, a big war for talent at the moment. There are so many vacancies and not enough people to fill them. So when it comes to creating a culture that helps people thrive at Gallagher, what sort of things are you doing to really try and drive that engagement and that belonging to Gallagher?
So we've done a couple of things within the IS team in Gallagher, specifically around culture, but also improving the diversity within the team. So we use a framework called the 5 Dysfunctions Framework, and it's actually based on a fairly famous book by Patrick Lencioni called the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And the premise of that is, if you want a high-performing team, you really have to go through those. There's 5 important levels, and it all starts with trust. And one of the biggest things around trust is having an environment that is psychologically safe. I've worked for some amazing organizations, including Gallagher. I'm arrogant enough to think that I've got a choice of, where I can work. And Gallagher is absolutely the place where I choose to work, and it's because of that culture. We're almost a company of engineers. We love to solve problems, and you can't get into effectively solving problems unless you're prepared to fail, and you can't have failure unless you have a psychologically safe environment. So we've really doubled down on making sure that there is an environment where people can put their hands up when things aren't going right. And we have a couple of rituals. I do an all hands briefing on every other Friday, and we have a monkey, and it's called the monkey shout. So if you've done something and had a failure, and you think there is a basis of learning for other people, we actually actively encourage people to come and talk about that at the team meeting. And if it's a real corker and they've got some really good learning, then they get the monkeys on the back for a couple of weeks. Now, obviously, we're not looking for people to fail just to win that, but you've really got to have an environment that allows us to do that. But there's another element to high performing teams as well, and that is, if you don't have diversity in your team, you are not going to have diversity of thinking, and that's a key tenet in terms of a high performing team. So as I say, use the Lencioni framework as something we can work through, and we've been on that journey for 3 years, and that type of cultural journey never ends, because as soon as you get a new person in the team, you're back into that storming, norming, performing thing as well. And I look at when I walked into my job and looked at my leadership team, 5 years ago, everybody looked like me. And I have nothing against middle-aged white male people, because that's me. But what I want in my leadership team and also throughout IS is a diversity and something that represents, the people that we sell to, but also the country that we live in, and enables us to get different points of view. And when I talk to diversity, I don't just mean demographics. There's, we talk about neurodiversity in the team as well. I'm a mild extrovert, as you may or may not be able to tell. Within the team, we have a large amount of introverts as well. And we work in different ways, and we talk about that as a team. So as an extrovert, I will leave room for an introvert to talk, and the expectation of the introverts is they step into the space that's available. So it's really, really important to give thought to, how you want your team to look. And these things are not done through altruism. There are proven performance benefits to dealing with the 5 dysfunctions of the team, and also having as diverse as possible a team. It's just the math in there. And I can tell you, as we've become, as the teams not only become larger, but more representative, we have improved our performance as an IS. It's directly back to those. And I could talk about, diversity and actually the things we need to do in New Zealand, because I don't think we're doing a particularly good job at grassroots. So I could talk about that forever.
Yeah, but we don't have forever, unfortunately. No. But what do you think are some practical things? I mean, what are some things that you did to encourage more diversity into the team and have a team that better reflects the Aotearoa that we live in?
Yeah, so look, we all know that we've got a major problem at the moment in terms of talent, in New Zealand. This is the only statement I'll make in this call around, government policy, but I've found the policy in the last 2 years has been peculiarly myopic, especially around immigration. And it's actually having or has had the opposite effect for the stated outcomes. And that's a real shame. But notwithstanding that, we've had this issue before COVID. And I can tell you what I've done and what I think all CIOs can do. And also a little bit about what we need to do as a nation. So the big thing for me is equality of opportunity. I have got to my position due to opportunities. Now, I've taken those opportunities, but they have, been presented to me. And now I'm in that role. It needs to be my mission to ensure that we have equality of opportunity within the team. And as I say, in my tenure, the IS team is much more representative of New Zealand as a whole, and that's great. I've talked about, what we need to do around neurodiversity as well. But we also have to be able to grow our own, because those skills will not just appear, and we can't just, of course we need to import some skills, but that's not the only solution. And it's like slices of a pizza. There's different things we need to do. So as a CIO, if you don't have things like a graduate program, you absolutely need to do that. If you don't have, mentorship programs set up, you absolutely should be doing that. You can also go further. So in Gallagher, we work with universities. We provide placements. We provide real world projects for, for students to work on. I myself, I've lectured, full time, and I still do the occasional guest lecture to try and pass on that knowledge. But I have to say that, when I look around that lecture hall, I still don't see a diverse group. And that's the heart of the problem. So as a CIO, there are, of course, lots of things that we can do. But when I look around, at the talent pool that's available to us, I do still ask myself questions about, well, where are the role models for the future? And unless people can see people who look like them in technology roles, we're stuck in this catch-22 situation. So how do we, as technologists, all of us in New Zealand, how do we capture the hearts and minds of 10-year-olds so that that production line of talent is front loaded? How do we ensure that the 16 to 18-year-olds have actually got the skills and the discipline to be fit for a modern workforce, or at least know what area of study they have a passion for? We've hired based on competency and culture fit. And thankfully, I think because Gallagher is an attractive place to work, we don't have too much difficulty. Of course, there's a couple of roles that, I really wish I could fill right now, and it's difficult, but over time, our workforce has become more representative. But for this to be a system-wide change, we have to fix this issue at the root. And it means government and industry coming together with a real long-term plan in order to see that funnel of talent filled up. And also for, as I say, for a 10-year-old to actually see, hell, this is really cool. And that person is doing a really great job in IT and they look just like me. Those are the things where I think we need to double down on. So there's some things we can do individually as CIOs, but there's also some things we need to do together with the government. And I don't necessarily think we're doing a great job at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to that old adage of, if you can't see it, you can't be it often. So yeah,
quite right.
Diversity brings more diversity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I love what you were talking about earlier with culture, about talking about failures, because I think it's something that we often don't do, and having that safe space to do so. So can you tell us, what are some of the mistakes that you have made that have really shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, so there's a couple. There's more than a couple, but there's two that spring immediately to mind. The first one is, one of my skills is as a systems thinker. Quite often I can join the dots up quite quickly, and sometimes in my career I've found that it's like, yeah, this is what we want to do. I know what to do, and boom, off we go. And there's a real danger of not taking people on the journey when you do that. So a couple of things I've learned from that. Number one, it's all about timing. So if you're some things that you need to do, but you have to ask the question, are there people who will support and actually be involved in that journey? And are we mature enough to take that journey? Because if not, just hold fire. It's much better to have something pulled than to try and push something. So yeah, taking people on the journey is definitely something that I've learned, and it's a permanent work on. And some of those failures have been when I haven't taken people on the journey. But the other one is back to that point I was making earlier, where we've used technology solutions to try and fix people or structure problems. So I can think of, and this is probably only 7 or 8 years ago, I can think of a CRM rollout that we did in my previous organization, and first time round it was absolutely terrible, and there was nothing wrong with the technology, right? It's the world-class, I'll name no names, but it's a blue logo shaped like a cloud, and it just really didn't go well. And the reality was that was around people and structure. So just make sure that when, as technologists, when we're going through these things, we understand what the root cause of any struggling moments are and apply the right solution to that. Because if it needs focus on people or training, or you need to change the structure within your organization, then for goodness sakes, please let's focus on that and not try and drive it through technology change, because that's where you're going to have a failure. And I've certainly had those failures in my career.
Right, and some great lessons there to share with others. So what's the best career advice you've ever received, Neville?
This is my old boss in BMW, and he was really good at getting me to wind my neck in every now and again. And one thing that always sticks in my mind is only care about things you're able to do something about. And it's so true. It's so hard to follow that rule. But there are some times when I can get really frustrated, and not just work, about life in general, and then I have to come back and calm myself down and say, is there actually anything I can do about that? Because if I can't, then I've got to stop worrying about it. That's the best advice. The best career advice I've had.
Yeah, great. That circle of influence, always coming back to it, isn't it? Yeah, it's so important. So finally, then, Neville, can you tell us what's important to you in the months ahead?
Yeah, so we've touched a little bit on this. It's really starting to enable those new ways of working. As you've gathered, we're undergoing a little bit of a transformation journey at Gallagher at the moment, and that's going to be an 18-month journey. So really getting into that. And as important is making sure that within IS, we've got the right operating model to support that. So we're really starting to understand, what those new ways of working are. And as an IS organization, we actually do need to make some changes to our operating model to support that. And that's really going to be my focus on the months ahead. The third thing I would add to that is, continuing to grow leadership capability in our team. We've gone from being a certain size business, we're looking to double the size within, the immediate future. So we don't just need more people, we need to grow the leadership capability in there. And there is a difference between leadership and management. And again, that's one of the things, that the difference between a CIO and an IT manager, and we need both, but it's leaders who influence people and take them on the journey. And that can't just be the CIO, that has to be my peers within the IS leadership group as well. So that's the third area of focus for the months ahead.
Great stuff. Well, we wish you all the very best with transforming the 83-year-old startup. Neville Richardson, CIO at Gallagher, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.